Imagine everything you were taught about a species was wrong. What if the weakest beings in the galaxy turned out to be the most dangerous? This is the story of a Zalkorian student who came to Earth, believing humans were fragile, only to discover a terrifying truth that could shake the entire galaxy. Join us as we uncover why humans, the so-called weaklings, might just be the universe's greatest threat. #### Chapter 1. Arrival at Earth expanded. Ka'lor had always been curious about humans, but not in a way that suggested admiration. Like most Zalkorians, he had been taught that humanity was a fragile, underdeveloped species, barely worth serious study. His instructors, scholars of the Zalkor Intergalactic Academy, referred to Earth as a primitive world with weak, soft-bodied inhabitants. Zalkorians themselves were tall, with dense, muscular bodies adapted for the high-gravity environment of their home planet. Humans, in contrast, were small and lived on a low-gravity planet, making them seem unimpressive. The entire concept of Earth had become something of a joke back on Zalkor. Ka'lor's peers would joke that even a Zalkorian child could outmatch a fully grown human in terms of strength and intellect. So, when Ka'lor received an invitation to spend a year studying on Earth, he accepted it with a sense of superiority. After all, what could these creatures possibly teach him? This experience, he thought, would be little more than an amusing adventure. Ka'lor's first glimpse of Earth came as his spacecraft broke through the atmosphere. From space, the planet had seemed picturesque, covered in oceans and large swaths of green land. As his ship descended, however, he saw the overcrowded cities, sprawling urban areas, and the haze of pollution that clung to them. The civilization below looked chaotic, inefficient. In comparison to the sleek, organized metropolises of Zalkor, Earth appeared disordered and messy. The spacecraft landed in the center of a large human city, one of their most advanced, according to the documents Ka'lor had received. The human officials who greeted him were polite, even friendly. But Ka'lor noticed the way they moved slowly, cautiously. They didn't have the sleek, efficient precision that Zalkorians did. Everything about them screamed weakness. Their soft skin, their short stature, and the almost comical way they seemed to bustle around like ants in a nest. As Ka'lor stepped onto the concrete surface of Earth, he felt a mild jolt of surprise at the planet's weak gravity. His muscles, built for the much heavier pull of Zalkor's homeworld, instantly felt lighter. Walking was effortless, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of superiority at how easily his body adapted to Earth's environment. "Welcome to Earth," said a man in a stiff, formal uniform, his voice carrying the same politeness that Ka'lor had come to expect from humans. "We hope your stay here will be educational and enjoyable." Ka'lor gave a dismissive nod, his thoughts already wandering. Educational? He doubted it. Humans had only just begun to scratch the surface of interstellar travel, and their technological advancements were primitive compared to Zalkor's capabilities. He knew he would be spending time in human universities, studying their history and science, but Ka'lor doubted there would be much to learn. More likely, he would be the one teaching them about advanced spacefaring civilizations and technologies they couldn't even imagine. After a brief orientation, Ka'lor was taken to his temporary living quarters. The accommodations were modest compared to what he was used to, but functional enough. As he unpacked, his thoughts turned to the upcoming months. He had been told that Earth was an unpredictable place, filled with various environmental dangers that humans had somehow managed to survive despite their weaknesses. But he wasn't worried. Zalkorians were far hardier than humans, and Ka'lor had been trained to survive in harsh conditions far worse than anything Earth could offer. Still, something gnawed at the back of his mind. It wasn't fear. Zalkorians didn't fear creatures as insignificant as humans. It was more of a curiosity. How had these fragile beings managed to survive on such a dangerous planet for so long? He had read about Earth's natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions, not to mention its dangerous fauna. Humans lived alongside predators that would have wiped out a weaker species. And yet, here they were, thriving. That evening, Ka'lor joined his human classmates for an introductory dinner. The other students, clearly excited about the arrival of an alien exchange student, bombarded him with questions. They were eager to learn about Zalkor, its culture, and its technology. Ka'lor answered politely, but with a tone of superiority, making it clear that his world was far beyond anything Earth had to offer. The humans listened in awe, confirming Ka'lor's assumptions that they were easily impressed and intellectually inferior. As the dinner progressed, Ka'lor found himself drawn into a conversation with Max, one of the more confident human students. Max was tall for a human, but still considerably shorter than Ka'lor. Despite this, there was something about him that intrigued Ka'lor. Perhaps it was the way Max spoke with ease, as if unbothered by Ka'lor's otherworldly presence. "I heard you Zalkorians are pretty strong," Max said with a grin. "How about we spar sometime? I'm into martial arts." Ka'lor raised an eyebrow. A human, challenging him to a sparring match. The very idea was laughable, but something about Max's grin, the way he seemed so confident, even in the face of a species known for its strength, piqued Ka'lor's curiosity. "Perhaps," Ka'lor replied, smirking, "but I wouldn't want to hurt you." Max chuckled, but didn't seem intimidated. "You might be surprised," he said. "We humans are tougher than we look." Ka'lor smiled to himself, dismissing the comment as nothing more than human bravado. As the evening came to a close, he felt a sense of satisfaction, certain that his time on Earth would be an easy, perhaps even amusing, adventure. What could these humans possibly teach him? Little did he know, the answer to that question would soon turn his entire understanding of the galaxy upside down. ####Chapter 2. The First Encounter Expanded. Ka'lor's first few days on Earth passed uneventfully. He spent much of his time observing human behavior from a distance, noting their strange habits, their seemingly inefficient ways of moving through the world. It puzzled him that a species as fragile and disorganized as humans had managed to build such large societies. From what he had seen, they were clumsy and disorganized, yet somehow they thrived. He reminded himself of his professor's words. Humans were weak, barely worthy of study. But still, something about their persistence nagged at him. On the third day, Max approached Ka'lor again in the campus courtyard. The other students, still fascinated by the alien visitor, gave them space as Max flashed his usual confident grin. "So, how about that sparring match?" Max asked, his voice light-hearted, but his eyes full of challenge. Ka'lor regarded him with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. He had seen Max move around the university, always with an easy confidence. He stood taller than many of the other students, with broad shoulders and a calm demeanor. But still, Ka'lor knew that even the strongest human was no match for a Zalkorian. Their skeletal structure, muscle density, and gravity-adapted physiology made them far superior to these delicate creatures. Ka'lor had no doubt that he would win the match easily, but something about Max's persistence intrigued him. Why would this human want a challenge of being so clearly stronger than him? "I accept," Ka'lor said, a smirk curling the edge of his lips. "But don't say I didn't warn you. Zalkorian strength is beyond anything you've encountered?" Max just shrugged, still grinning. "Let's find out." Later that evening, Ka'lor followed Max to a gym on campus, where they would have their sparring match. The room was simple, with padded mats on the floor and a few onlookers who had gathered out of curiosity. The other students watched from the sidelines, whispering excitedly among themselves. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, and Ka'lor could sense that the humans expected something extraordinary. He wasn't worried. This would be over in seconds, he thought. Max was clearly overconfident, unaware of the sheer power a Zalkorian possessed. Max stretched his arms and rolled his shoulders as they stood on opposite ends of the mat. "I've been training in martial arts for years," Max said casually. "It's a great way to stay in shape and learn some discipline." Ka'lor nodded absent-mindedly. "Martial arts? I suppose that might be useful for you. Zalkorians have no need for such practices. Our strength is enough." Max chuckled, as though he found Ka'lor's remark amusing, which irked the alien slightly. Max stepped into a fighting stance, his feet light on the mat. Ka'lor remained standing tall, hands relaxed at his sides. He figured there was no need for preparation. Max would be overwhelmed the moment they engaged. "Ready?" Max asked, his eyes locking with Ka'lor's. "Whenever you are," Ka'lor replied, completely confident in his impending victory. Max moved first. His footwork was quick, almost too quick for a human, and Ka'lor barely had time to register the movement before Max's fist came flying toward him. Ka'lor easily sidestepped, grabbing Max's arm and preparing to throw him down with the kind of force that would end the match. But something unexpected happened. Max twisted his body, using Ka'lor's own momentum to slip free of the grip. With a fluid motion, Max countered, sweeping Ka'lor's leg out from under him. Before Ka'lor even realized what was happening, he found himself on the ground, staring up at the ceiling. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. Ka'lor was stunned. He, a Zalkorian, one of the strongest species in the galaxy, had been knocked down by a human. A human! How was this possible? He had barely even felt Max's grip, and yet here he was, flat on his back. Max stood over him, offering a hand with that same easygoing smile. "You okay?" Ka'lor's mind raced. This didn't make sense. No human should have been able to move like that, let alone overpower him. He accepted Max's hand, his mind still grappling with the absurdity of what had just happened. As he stood, a flicker of doubt crept into his thoughts. "I wasn't expecting that," Ka'lor admitted, trying to mask his confusion. Max chuckled, not in a mocking way, but with genuine warmth. "No worries, man. You've probably never fought someone my size before. Humans have to rely on agility and technique, not just brute strength." Ka'lor frowned slightly. Agility? Technique? He had dismissed human combat styles as primitive, believing that raw power would always win the day. But now, standing in front of Max, he began to wonder if there was more to human combat than he had initially thought. The speed and fluidity of Max's movements had been impressive, far beyond what Ka'lor had expected from a species he had been taught to think of as inferior. Determined not to let this first encounter shake his confidence too much, Ka'lor readied himself for another round. This time, he would be more careful. He wouldn't underestimate Max again. They squared off once more, and this time, Ka'lor used his superior size and strength more strategically. He managed to block some of Max's initial attacks, but he quickly realized that every move he made, Max had an answer for. When Ka'lor tried to overpower him, Max would slip away, using his speed and precision to avoid being pinned. It was as if Max was anticipating his every move. After a few minutes of sparring, Ka'lor found himself breathing heavily, something that rarely happened during physical exertion. Meanwhile, Max seemed completely relaxed, as though the fight was a mere warm-up for him. Finally, Ka'lor called for a stop, frustration bubbling up inside him. He had been bested not once, but twice. And it wasn't just Max's physical abilities that bothered him. It was the way he had remained calm, controlled, and unshaken throughout the entire match. Max wasn't just stronger than Ka'lor had anticipated. He was smarter in the way he fought. Max patted him on the back. "Not bad, Ka'lor. You're strong. But strength isn't everything. You've got to be able to adapt." Ka'lor nodded, too stunned to speak. He had entered the match convinced of his superiority, only to walk away questioning everything he had been taught. If Max was this capable, what other surprises did humanity have in store? As he left the gym that evening, Ka'lor's confidence was shaken for the first time in his life. The humans he had once considered weak were proving to be far more formidable than he could have ever imagined. Chapter 3. Unveiling the Truth expanded. The days following Ka'lor's sparring match with Max were unsettling. For the first time, Ka'lor found himself questioning the teachings he had held as absolute truth. His instructors back on Zalkor had painted humans as weak and unremarkable, but Max's effortless agility and strength told a different story. This was not the first time Ka'lor had seen evidence that humans might be more than they appeared, but it was the first time he felt it on such a personal level. One night, as Ka'lor roamed the university library, still shaken from his earlier defeat, he stumbled upon a conversation between two human professors. They were discussing a topic he hadn't heard of before, something called Deathworld theory. Curious, Ka'lor stepped closer, listening from behind a shelf of books. Earth is classified as a death world, one of the highest classes, one professor said, his voice low but serious. Ka'lor felt a jolt of confusion. Deathworld? What is that? He strained to hear more. The other professor nodded gravely. It's a miracle humans survived at all. Earth is an incredibly hostile environment, dangerous predators, extreme weather, diseases. Evolution on a Deathworld forces species to develop incredible resilience and adaptability. That's why humans are so tough. They're survivors. Ka'lor froze. His mind raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Earth, this seemingly unremarkable planet, was one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. Humans weren't weak because they were frail. They were strong because they had adapted to a world that constantly tried to kill them. Every storm, every predator, every illness had shaped humans into beings who could endure and thrive under extreme pressure. The realization shook Ka'lor to his core. Back on Zalkor, they had dismissed humans as weak because they didn't understand the context of their existence. They had focused on human limitations, without recognizing the strength that lay in their resilience. Ka'lor began to wonder, what else had his people misunderstood about humans? This newfound truth haunted Ka'lor, casting doubt on everything he had been taught. The more he thought about it, the more unsettled he became. Humans were far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Chapter 4. The hidden power of humanity expanded. Ka'lor couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in him after overhearing the conversation about Earth's classification as a death world. Every encounter he had with humans now carried a new weight. He no longer saw them as the fragile, inconsequential beings he had once dismissed them as. Instead, he started noticing things, small details that hinted at the hidden strength humanity possessed. One afternoon, Ka'lor attended a lecture on human biology, hoping to make sense of what he had learned. The professor, a tall, wiry man with a passion for evolutionary science, was discussing the unique adaptations of humans. Humans, the professor said, are a product of their environment. Earth is an unpredictable and dangerous place, filled with challenges that force constant adaptation. Most life forms on Earth have evolved to endure harsh climates, predators, and diseases. And unlike many species, humans aren't just physically resilient. They've developed extreme mental and emotional fortitude. Ka'lor leaned forward, paying closer attention. The professor continued, pulling up images of Earth's landscapes on the screen. Take, for example, extreme cold. Many species avoid such environments, but humans? They create tools, build shelters, develop clothing, and adapt to live in even the harshest conditions. They endure extreme heat, floods, droughts, even pandemics, and they don't just survive, they thrive. Ka'lor felt a growing sense of awe. The professor spoke not with pride, but with a matter-of-fact tone, as though it was completely normal for humans to be as resilient as they were. But to Ka'lor, it sounded nothing short of extraordinary. The more he learned about humans, the more he realized that their strength lay not in brute force, but in something far deeper, an inner resolve that allowed them to overcome unimaginable odds. The professor continued, now let's talk about the human pain threshold. Humans are one of the few species that can push their bodies far beyond their limits. Soldiers and athletes have been documented running on broken legs, continuing to fight even after sustaining injuries that would incapacitate most other beings. Their ability to endure pain is almost unmatched. Ka'lor thought back to Max. During their sparring match, Ka'lor had applied enough pressure in their brief exchanges to injure most other species. And yet Max hadn't flinched. He had fought with focus and determination, as though pain was just an inconvenience. Ka'lor had initially thought it was a fluke, but now he realized that this was just how humans were. They had learned to ignore pain, push through it, and keep going when others would give up. The lecture ended, but Ka'lor couldn't stop thinking about what he had learned. Everything about humans was starting to make sense in a way that both fascinated and unsettled him. Their survival wasn't just a result of luck or chance. It was a testament to their adaptability and willpower. That evening, Ka'lor found himself in the student lounge, where Max was relaxing with a group of friends. Ka'lor watched them from a distance, intrigued by how effortlessly humans interacted with one another. There was a casualness, a sense of ease that Ka'lor couldn't quite understand. On Zalkor, social interactions were often formal and stiff, but humans joked, laughed, and teased each other without hesitation. They seemed to draw strength from their relationships, from the bonds they formed. Max noticed Ka'lor watching and waved him over. "Hey, Ka'lor." You want to join us?" Ka'lor hesitated for a moment, then nodded and walked over. He still wasn't used to the informal way humans interacted, but he was beginning to appreciate their openness. As he sat down, one of Max's friends, a girl named Jenna, looked at him curiously. "So, what's it like on your planet?" she asked, genuinely interested. "I heard Zalkor is really advanced." Ka'lor paused. For the first time, he wasn't sure how to answer. His view of Zalkor had always been one of superiority. His people were stronger, more advanced, and more efficient than any other species. But now, after learning more about humans, he wasn't so sure. Zalkorians might be physically stronger, but humans had a strength of a different kind, one that couldn't be measured by muscles or technology. "It's different," Ka'lor said slowly. "We value strength and efficiency. Our society is very structured, and we don't face the same environmental challenges as you do here on Earth." Max grinned. "Yeah, Earth's got a way of keeping us on our toes. But that's what makes life interesting, right?" Ka'lor nodded, still deep in thought. As the conversation continued, he found himself growing more comfortable with the group. He listened as they talked about their daily lives, their struggles and triumphs. He noticed something else too. Humans weren't just resilient in the face of physical danger. They were emotionally strong as well. They faced personal challenges with the same determination they showed in combat or survival. Whether it was dealing with loss, heartbreak, or failure, they had an uncanny ability to bounce back. Later that night, Ka'lor walked back to his dorm, his mind swirling with new thoughts. Everything he had believed about humans was being turned upside down. They weren't weak. In fact, they were perhaps the strongest species he had ever encountered. Not because of their physical prowess, but because of their ability to endure, adapt, and overcome. As he lay down to sleep, Ka'lor couldn't help but feel a growing sense of admiration for the humans. They had been underestimated for so long, not just by his people, but by the entire galaxy. What other secrets did they hold? What other strengths lay hidden beneath the surface? Ka'lor knew one thing for sure. He had a lot more to learn about humanity. And somehow, he had the feeling that what he had discovered so far was just the beginning. Chapter 5. Confronting Fear expanded. The more Ka'lor learned about humans, the more conflicted he became. Everything he had been taught about them seemed so incomplete, so utterly wrong. The fear of the unknown gnawed at him. How could a species so seemingly fragile possess such immense hidden strength? How had they survived the brutal challenges of their death world, and more importantly, how had they thrived to the point of becoming a significant force in the galaxy? Ka'lor wasn't sure what troubled him more, the fact that humans had been so underestimated, or the possibility that they were far more powerful than anyone had realized. One evening, Ka'lor decided to confront his fears head-on. He sought out Max, needing answers, needing to understand. Max was in the gym again, this time practicing alone. The rhythmic sound of punches hitting a training bag filled the room, echoing through the empty space. Ka'lor stood at the entrance for a moment, watching in silence. Every punch Max threw was precise, full of focus and determination. There was a fire in him, a quiet intensity that Ka'lor had come to respect. Max noticed Ka'lor and waved him over with a friendly smile, wiping sweat from his brow. "Hey, Ka'lor, what's up?" Ka'lor hesitated, his usually confident demeanor faltering. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about our sparring match, and about everything I've learned since then." Max paused, sensing the seriousness in Ka'lor's tone. "Sure, man. What's on your mind?" Ka'lor stepped closer, his yellow eyes narrowing slightly as he spoke. "Humans, you're not what I expected. I've been taught my whole life that your species is weak, insignificant compared to mine. But after what I've seen, after fighting you and learning about Earth's classification as a death world, I don't understand how such a view could be so wrong. How did my people misjudge yours so completely?" Max chuckled softly, though his expression remained thoughtful. He leaned against the training bag, crossing his arms. "I think a lot of species make that mistake. They look at us and see a species that's not as physically strong, not as fast or durable, but they don't see the whole picture. Humans are survivors, Ka'lor. We've had to be, from the moment we evolved. Our world forces us to be adaptable, to find ways around challenges instead of brute forcing through them. Ka'lor nodded slowly, his mind racing to keep up with the conversation. But it's more than just survival. You're resilient in ways I've never encountered before. You endure pain, push past limits, and you don't give up easily. Where does that come from? Is it because of Earth's harsh environment? Max thought for a moment, then smiled softly. Part of it, yeah. Growing up in a world like Earth, we learned early on that nothing comes easy. There's always something trying to knock you down, whether it's a wild animal, a storm, or just the challenges of life itself. We had to learn to adapt. But it's also something deeper, I think. It's our mindset. Ka'lor's brow furrowed. Mindset? Yeah, Max replied, leaning forward slightly. Humans have this drive, this refusal to accept defeat. We've always been small compared to the universe, fragile even. But that's never stopped us from trying to push beyond our limits. We keep fighting, keep exploring, because we believe there's always more to discover, always more we can do. It's part of who we are. Ka'lor felt a strange mixture of awe and fear settle over him. It wasn't just that humans were strong in ways he hadn't anticipated. It was that their strength was unpredictable. It came from a place that defied logic, from a refusal to accept the natural order. Humans didn't just survive, they thrived in defiance of the odds. There's one more thing I don't understand, Ka'lor said, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. Why aren't other species afraid of you? With everything you've been through, with the strength you've developed because of it, why haven't you become a dominant force in the galaxy? Why hasn't the rest of the universe realized how dangerous you are? Max's expression turned serious, and for the first time, Ka'lor saw a flicker of something darker in his eyes. Because we don't want to be feared, Max said softly. Humans, we've seen what happens when fear takes over. We've made mistakes, terrible ones, and we know the damage that fear can do. So we try to build alliances, friendships, instead of conquering. That doesn't mean we're not capable of being dangerous. We are. But we choose not to be unless we have no other option. Ka'lor felt a chill run down his spine. There was something deeply unsettling about the idea that humanity's greatest strength was one they chose not to use unless absolutely necessary. It reminded him of a predator that only struck when cornered. But when it did, the consequences were devastating. You mean if someone pushed you too far? Ka'lor asked cautiously. Max nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. If someone threatens what we care about, if they push us to the edge, we'll fight back with everything we have. And trust me, you don't want to see what happens when humanity decides to go all out. We don't like showing that side of ourselves, but it's there. Ka'lor's mind raced as he absorbed Max's words. The galaxy had been so focused on the humans' perceived weaknesses that they had missed the real danger. The quiet, controlled power that lay beneath the surface. Humanity's strength wasn't just in their physical resilience. It was in their determination, their adaptability, and their choice to hold back until absolutely necessary. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Ka'lor felt truly afraid, not of Max, or even of humans themselves, but of what might happen if the rest of the galaxy continued to underestimate them. Humans were not weak. They were a force waiting to be unleashed. And if the galaxy wasn't careful, it might one day learn just how terrifying that force could be. As Ka'lor left the gym that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The humans he had once dismissed as fragile and insignificant were far more than they appeared. And now Ka'lor realized, it wasn't just him who had something to fear. It was the entire galaxy.